Sometimes the crash doesn't happen in the room. It shows up later, when the house is quiet, and your body finally stops pretending it was fine. You can laugh, respond, stay present, and even seem relaxed. Then hours later, something in you drops, like a curtain finally letting go. That delay can be confusing. It makes you wonder why a normal conversation can turn into a strange heaviness by night. You weren't being fake. You were just using energy in places most people never notice. Some people leave a social moment and keep moving. You leave it physically, but part of your mind is still there. It's replaying the tone in someone's voice. It's checking whether you said too much, too little, or something that landed wrong. While everyone else seems to move on, your nervous system is still sorting the room. It is still processing faces, moods, pauses, and things nobody said out loud. That is why the exhaustion arrives late. The event ends first, but your internal work keeps going. You may notice it in tiny ways. You get home, set your keys down, and suddenly feel older than you did an hour ago. You sit at the edge of the bed for a second too long. You scroll without seeing anything because your mind is still crowded. Sometimes it feels emotional. Sometimes it feels physical, like your muscles are tired for reasons your day does not explain. And that can make you doubt yourself. You start thinking, nothing big even happened. So why do I feel so depleted? But social exhaustion is not only about how long you were around people. It is about how much of yourself stayed switched on the entire time. If you are highly observant, social moments are never just social moments. They are live environments filled with information your mind keeps absorbing. You notice the shift in someone's expression before they speak. You hear tension in a joke and sadness hiding inside a normal sentence. You track the energy of the room without meaning to. You feel when someone is slightly distant, slightly irritated, slightly hurt, or not fully okay. That awareness can look like calm from the outside. Inside it is a constant stream of quiet calculations. So while another person may just be having lunch, you are having lunch and reading 12 invisible signals. You are talking and translating at the same time. That kind of inner work does not always feel intense in the moment. It often feels subtle, almost automatic, which is exactly why it gets underestimated. You do not always notice the cost while you are paying it. You notice it when the stimulation is gone and the bill finally reaches your body. This is part of why the exhaustion arrives hours later. Your system waits until you're safe enough to feel what it postponed. In the moment, your attention is outward. Later, when the world quiets down, your body turns the volume back inward. And then everything you held together starts becoming noticeable. The mental tabs open, the emotional residue becomes visible. That delayed crash is not random weakness. It is often delayed recognition. Sensitive people are often good at staying composed in real time. They can be warm, thoughtful, attentive, and easy to talk to. But that composure can hide how active they are internally. They are not only participating, they are also monitoring, filtering, adjusting, and absorbing. They are choosing words carefully. They are reading whether honesty is welcome or whether the room only wants easy answers. They are feeling how much space they take up. They are deciding, over and over, how visible it is safe to be. Even pleasant social moments can create this strain, especially when you care, because caring makes you process more. That is why you can leave dinner with people you love and still feel strangely empty later. Connection happened, but so did effort. The effort was not always obvious. It was hidden inside self-control, empathy, and constant awareness. You might be the person who notices when someone goes quiet. You might be the one who senses a shift before the conversation changes. That seems like a gift, and sometimes it is. But gifts can become weight when they are always turned on. Because awareness is not free, deep perception creates mental traffic. You are not just hearing what happened. You are hearing what it meant, what it might mean, and what it could mean later. That is why a quick interaction can follow you into the night. Your body left the store, but your mind is still unpacking the cashier's mood in your own response. It can happen after work, too. You answer messages, sit through meetings, stay polite, and only later realize your brain feels scorched. Not because the tasks were impossible, because every interaction added one more layer of cognitive and emotional noise. For some people, silence is empty. For you, silence is when the backlog finally speaks. That is why evenings can feel strange. The day is technically over, but inside, nothing has fully landed yet. You make tea, turn the lights low, and finally exhale. Then the replay begins. A look from earlier returns. A sentence you barely noticed at noon suddenly feels loaded at 10:47 p.m. You start editing tiny moments in your head. Should I have answered differently, stayed longer, explained more, said less? It is not vanity. It is unfinished processing. Your mind is trying to complete loops your body could not finish while staying functional. It wants closure, clarity, and a sense of safety. That is why social exhaustion is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like staring at the ceiling with your jaw tight. Sometimes it looks like needing an hour of silence after a 20-minute visit. Sometimes it looks like canceling plans you genuinely wanted. Sometimes it looks like lying in bed tired but unable to drop. Your body is still lit up, even though your personality is begging for peace. And the hard part is that other people often do not see any of this. They saw you smile, contribute, and seem totally okay. So when you go quiet later, it can feel invisible. You do not have language for why your energy suddenly disappeared. You might call yourself antisocial, difficult, or too much, but often you're just carrying more inner data than the moment seems to require. You may also be absorbing emotions that were never yours. Not in a mystical way, but in a deeply human one. When someone is tense, cold, disappointed, or emotionally scattered, your system may start adjusting around it. You tighten slightly, monitor more, and spend energy trying to stay balanced. You may leave a room thinking you are tired. What you really are is saturated. Saturated by mixed signals. Saturated by your own restraint and everyone else's unspoken weather. This is why the exhaustion can feel delayed and oddly disproportionate. It is not coming from one moment, but from accumulated micro-strain. A forced laugh here, a careful response there, a small self-edit every few minutes. None of those things seem dramatic by themselves. Together they create an invisible tax on your nervous system. And nervous systems do not always invoice immediately. They often wait until the demand is over. That is why you can seem bright during the gathering and feel flattened later in the shower. Your body finally has enough privacy to stop performing regulation. The same thing can happen after a good day. You can enjoy people and still pay for the stimulation later. That matters because it keeps you from misunderstanding yourself. Delayed exhaustion does not always mean the experience was bad. It often means the experience was full of noise, attention, emotion, decisions, impression management, and subtle self-control. Some people get tired from conflict. You may get tired from contact itself, especially when the contact asks your system to stay finely tuned. Being finely tuned sounds beautiful until you realize how little rest it leaves. It means your antenna is working even when you wish it would dim. You notice the friend who says they are okay too quickly. You notice the coworker whose smile does not reach their eyes. You notice when a room feels slightly off and start adapting before anyone asks you to. That adaptation looks small, but it costs. It costs attention. It costs body energy. It costs the soft part of you that never fully stops listening. Over time, this can create a very specific kind of tiredness. Not dramatic collapse, but a chronic sense that your inner world is always a little overused. You sleep, but your mind still feels crowded. You rest, but your system does not feel fully restored. That can be discouraging, especially when life looks manageable on paper. You start comparing your tiredness to visible hardships. Then you minimize yourself because your exhaustion does not look impressive enough. But invisible strain is still strain. The fact that it is quiet does not make it small. There is a hidden cost to being deeply aware. You do not just experience moments, you absorb their texture. You remember how someone sounded. You remember what changed in the room when one sentence landed badly. You remember the emotional weight of ordinary places. A cafe, a hallway, a dinner table can stay in your system long after you leave. That does not mean you are broken. It means your processing does not end where the event ends. And this is where many sensitive people become unfair to themselves. They expect recovery to happen on the same timeline as everybody else. But your system may need more space between inputs, more silence, more slowness, more unstructured time where nothing is being asked of you. Not because you are weak, because your mind does deep work beneath the surface. The answer is not to romanticize exhaustion. Being perceptive is not noble when it turns into constant depletion. There is nothing glamorous about needing 2 days to recover from one evening. There is nothing enlightened about never feeling fully settled. So the goal is not to praise the fatigue. The goal is to understand it clearly enough that you stop fighting it. Once you understand the pattern, the shame starts losing its grip. You stop treating your delayed exhaustion like a character flaw. You realize your crash is often the truth arriving late. Your body is simply reporting what your social self had to postpone. That realization can be strangely tender. It helps you stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What did that moment quietly cost me?" Sometimes the cost was overstimulation. Sometimes it was emotional labor. Sometimes it was the effort of staying readable while protecting what you really felt. Sometimes it was just too many impressions with nowhere to go. Too many voices, faces, decisions, and emotional fragments left open. No wonder the exhaustion comes later. Later is when your inner world finally gets a turn. And when you begin to see that, your habits may change. You may stop booking yourself back to back just because you technically can. You may stop calling yourself lazy for needing silence after connection. You may stop treating your recovery like a weakness. You may even become more honest in small ways, leaving earlier, pausing longer, answering less quickly, protecting the part of you that gets overloaded first. Not to become distant, to become less internally abandoned. Because that is what happens when you ignore this pattern for too long. You become loyal to other people's comfort and disconnected from your own limits. And then the exhaustion keeps deepening. It stops being about one night and starts becoming your baseline. But when you respect the delayed crash, something softens. You stop forcing yourself to feel fine just because the room is over. You let the after effects count. You let the hidden half of the experience be real. That matters more than it seems. Self-understanding often begins where self-dismissal used to live. Maybe that is why this kind of exhaustion hurts so much. It is not just fatigue, it is fatigue that rarely gets witnessed. People see your calm face. They do not see the storm that starts when the door finally closes. They do not see the late-night ceiling, the quiet kitchen, the heavy eyes that still cannot settle. They do not hear the mind trying to metabolize the day. But you feel it, and if you had felt it for years, there is something important you should hear. You are not exhausted because you are failing at life. You may be exhausted because you have been living with your inner volume turned high for a very long time. You have been carrying awareness like other people carry bags, so naturally, you feel it later when your arms finally lower. That does not make you fragile. It makes you someone whose energy is spent in subtle places. And subtle places still count. Quiet effort still drains the body. So if the exhaustion arrives hours later, believe it when it comes. Do not interrogate it just because it missed the moment. Some truths do not speak during the noise. They wait for the silence. Maybe that is the deepest thing to understand about yourself. Your tiredness is not always a mystery. Sometimes it is the most honest message your system has. It is saying that was more than it looked. Not because you are too sensitive for the world, but because you feel the world in layers other people often walk past. And when that hidden tiredness finally reaches you at night, it is not weakness arriving late. It is your inner life asking, at last, to be believed.